Hello everyone and welcome to His Author's Voice. Stories with a twist. I am the author, Jack Sanger. Now today's story comes from the conjunction of two areas of interest, dreams and quantum theory. See how you go. I hope you enjoy it. The title of the story is The Light at the End of the Tunnels. He reached the pub grounds in the Pennine village just as the event was starting to get underway. He'd heard all about it by chance during the gossip that occasioned when he spent the evening with an antique collector friend. Their conversation had turned to the subject of passionate and obsessive collectors of objects. Objets d'art in these collectors' eyes. Vintage motorbikes, cars, tools, cigarette cards, medals, coins, stamps. Anyway, once a year, apparently, in a marquee in the Murderer's Arms car park, there was a collector's jamboree. Out of their Aladdin's cave habitats, the indoor recluses came, pasty-faced, unfashionably attired, and gimlet-eyed, to down slow pints and gins to discuss their finds and do some deals. They mixed congenially with tanned outdoor extroverts in their expensive bike leathers and tweeds. Apart from the usual bartering, the highlight would be an auction for charity in which there would be an eclectic assortment of donations, usually duplicates of the treasures they already owned in far better condition, and which they had no intention of selling. Rufus Grant had taken early retirement from his job as a science journalist. He had a bit of spare money for an indulgence, and had of late begun searching for a vintage car. Why a car? Well, it was the consequence of waking up one morning a few weeks before, having had the most terrible nightmare. And this was it. He was driving across France in an old red Citroën 2CV. Unaccountably, he was speaking French, despite having left behind all attempts at that tongue at school. The young French woman beside him in the car appeared to understand him perfectly well. They were lovers, and, as can be the way of dreams, she was the woman he had sought and never found in all his life. So here he was, a 6-year-old dreamer, dreaming a dream in which he was called Jean-Baptiste Grimaud and occupied a 25-year-old body, entangled with the beautiful Emily, singer, dancer, and a flame for every moth she came across, male or female. Dreams can compress reality. Everything can be condensed into milliseconds. The past, present, and future of an entire life can be known instantly the dream begins. In this case, his dreamt self, Jean-Baptiste, was the youngest of 4 sons in a well-to-do French farming family. Since there were no plans for him in the family business, he had been free to go to university and study quantum physics. He was a bit of a maths genius and got himself a doctoral place in an esteemed Paris-based research institute. Jean-Baptiste was quite unlike the man who was dreaming him. He was slim, angelically profiled, elegant and extrovert. He wore a bright red beret to contrast pleasingly with his flawless golden skin and long dark hair. He had green eyes. Green. And oh, how he loved Emily and she him. how they would spend their lives together living a bohemian life on the Rive Gauche, the artist and the scientist. He glanced across at her and felt yet another wild upsurge of desire and delight, a certainty in their joint destiny, a timeless fusion of their deepest spiritual selves. They were coasting down an incline through the mountains near Foix in the Pyrenees. Ahead, the two lanes of the carriageway divided to enter separate tunnels. It was an old 2CV, so he opted to take the slower lane. But the car ploughed straight on, as though certain to crash into the central wall that divided the tunnels. They looked at each other and mouthed, "Je t'aime tellement." At the last moment there was a wild turbulence, then a moment of blackness, and suddenly two identical 2CVs were racing through the adjacent tunnels. When they emerged into the light at the far end, he was alone in one car, and he saw a duplicate Jean-Baptiste and Emily's frightened eyes in the other racing alongside him. Then the other car took to the air, dissolved in a fine smoke, and disappeared. He pulled up in a lay-by. He touched the passenger seat. It was cold, very empty. He woke up. The sickness of abandonment spread throughout his body. No Emily. No dream to come true. There never had been or would be an Emily in his life. He was an unmarried, childless, aging man made brutally aware that joy had passed him by. The weeks passed. As the pain gave way to a dull ache, an avenue for possible relief began to form in his thoughts. Outlandish, but possible. Hence, his presence this day at the murderer's arms. He quickly found his friend and was led to a man standing beside a blue two-seater American car with huge rear fins. They passed pleasantries, and then the car dealer asked, "So what are you looking for?" "A Citroën 2CV. Oldish? 30 years? Blimey, really? Slow, left-hand drive, 12-volt battery, horrible gears, claustrophobic?" "Yes." "Perfect. And red." "Well, as it happens..." Was the man teasing him? "Yes? I haven't. But I can get you one. Imported from a French mate of mine. 2 or 3 weeks it'll take. Ready to drive." The car arrived on a truck with all the documentation transferred to his name. He glanced through it. A small folder contained all the receipts for past work done on it. A name caught his attention and paralysed his fingers momentarily. Monsieur J.P. Grimaud. The dream. The dream. He'd been right. 6 weeks later, he was driving through Foix in the French Pyrenees. Following his intuition, he took a turn towards Andorra. He felt sure he would soon find the road of his dream. A girl was hitchhiking just past the turnoff. As he drew up, she looked at him suspiciously. Of course, it was Emily. His heart raced. But he reminded himself, to her, he was not Jean-Baptiste. He was a 60-year-old stranger. He remained calm, polite. "Où vas-tu?" she asked. Andorra. His English pronunciation made her nod. Very good. I come with you, she managed to reply. They tried talking, but it was so basic they relapsed into silence. He glanced now and then at her wonderful young profile. Suddenly the car was on the gradient leading down to the twin tunnels. He turned his head towards her. Hold tight, he shouted as they hurtled towards the central dividing wall. Je t'aime tellement, she screamed. The following day, gendarmerie in the Pyrenees found a car in a lay-by beyond the exit from some tunnels. There was no sign of its occupant. When they went through the documents in the fascia compartments, they were surprised to discover the owner was an Englishman named Rufus Grant. But what had befallen him remained a mystery. So, there we have it, the curious case of Mr. Rufus Grant. As I said at the beginning, the quantum universe tends to stand much of what we think of as reality on its head. After the cryptical, paradoxical, double-slit experiments with light, which obviously stimulated this tale, the world changed, particularly with the work of scientist philosophers such as David Bohm, who began to speculate on the place of consciousness as a force among those governing the laws of the universe. Anyway, my reading led me to the story you've just heard, and there are many, many more on this channel. If you haven't heard them already, please forage. Meanwhile, if you go to my site www.jacksanger.com, there are novels, plays and short stories for you to read and download for free, or you can make a donation. Please be sure you've subscribed to this channel, and if possible, pass the link on to your friends. So that's all for now. I wish you well. Go in peace. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.